Hollandse herfst, het regent en het waait en toch gaan we listdodden oogsten. Mechteld van landgoed Groot Overbrugge verwelkomt de aanwezige boeren van verschillende generaties en andere deelnemers. Allemaal met interesse in natuurinclusieve landbouw en duurzame teeltmethoden op natte en vernatte bodem. Ze boert in Brabant en houdt zich actief bezig met duurzame landbouw en waterbeheer. Gert-Jan van DUINEN van het waterschap AA Maas vertelt hoe Mechteld een perceel ter beschikking stelde voor een Paludiculture-experiment met listdodden. Terwijl Robert Welling de innovatieve machine introduceert voor het oogsten van listdodden die we vandaag in actie zullen zien. Peter van Dijk van het waterschap AA Maas onderkent de noodzaak van klimaatbestendig beheer van het watersysteem. Hij ziet perspectieven voor paludicultuur en roept nogmaals op tot een betere samenwerking van iedereen, aangezien we goede bedrijfsmodellen nodig hebben om paludicultuur op grotere schaal te laten plaatsvinden.
Weet wat dit is überhaupt? Of ja, wat staat hier?
Job van de Krommert en zijn collega's van Verbruggen Paddenstoelen onderzoeken toepassingen van biomassa uit gewassen als listdodden en gras, als substraat voor paddenstoelen of voor bouwmateriaal. Gebruik als isolatiemateriaal of ter vervanging van fossiel veen in potgrond zijn andere voorbeelden van listdodden toepassingen. De listdodde en koolstofboer Aldert van Weeren werkt in Duitsland en is sterk betrokken bij Wetlandproducten. Hij legt verdere details over de teelt van listdodden uit en koppelt deze aan andere aspecten van de waardeketen, terwijl hij samenwerkt met Robert Welling bij het aanpassen van machines voor paludicultuur. Deze boer-tot-boer-bijeenkomst wordt georganiseerd om ambities en ervaringen uit te wisselen tussen geïnteresseerde partijen. De bijeenkomst richt zich op het uitwisselen van informatie en inspiratie over innovatieve machines voor het oogsten van listdodden, aangezien herbevochtigde bodems en paludicultuur aanpassingen in landbouwtechnologie vereisen. Gert-Jan van DUINEN legt uit hoe in de zomer van 2020 het subrrogatie- en drainagesysteem is aangelegd om het waterpeil hoog te houden. Hij wijst op het belang van paludicultuur voor het verminderen van bodemdaling en kooldioxide-emissies van gedraineerde veengronden. In deze pilot werd listdodden geplant. Andere voorbeelden van paludicultuurgewassen zijn riet, azolla, wilgen en moerasmossen. Aldert van Weeren voegt daar zijn kweekervaring aan toe en nodigt het publiek uit om de wortels van listdodden te zien en zelfs te proeven. Hij beantwoordt twijfels over listdodden in koudere klimaten en vertelt vrolijk over de oogstmachine die Robert Welling gaat presenteren. Robert Welling gaat in op de impact van zware machines op opnieuw bevochtigde bodems en introduceert daarmee de innovatieve kenmerken van deze oogstmachine. Lichtgewicht materialen, nieuwe Euro 5 motor, geen oliedruppels in het gebied, 1 werkgang. Hij noemt ook de huidige aanpassing van het containersysteem om een containervrachtwagen aan de rand van het veld te laden. Als het oogsten begint, reageren de deelnemers opgewonden, omdat ze zien dat de machine heel goed functioneert op de natte grond. Ze nemen foto's en bespreken levendig hoe de machine niet verdrinkt. De druk van de machine op de grond is zelfs lager dan die van de mens en de machine zuigt het gewas niet aan en zuigt daardoor ook geen kikkers en andere dieren de machine in. De geoogste listdodde markeert het einde van een succesvolle demonstratie. De geoogste listdodde wordt geschonken aan de buffelboerderij van een van de deelnemende boeren. De regen is weg, de zon verlicht de middag en de oogst is gedaan. Deelnemende boeren gaan naar huis met een nieuwe en rijke ervaring over paludicultuur.
Hello to our lovely audience and speakers. I very much hope that you enjoyed the video because there's lots more interesting stuff to come. A very, very warm welcome on this relatively cold winter's evening. I'm in Brussels to the second of two virtual events organised by Carbon Connects. It's an EU-funded Interreg Northwest Europe project. First of all, very important, can you make sure that you're listening in the language of your choice, as we do have interpretation, English, French, Dutch and German. My name is Katrina Sickle. I'm a moderator and a former broadcaster, and it's my pleasure to take us all through this second 90-minute virtual event. Of course, the first part, which you may or may not have attended, was last Tuesday. Now, if you didn't catch it and you want to, you just need to take a look at the Carbon Connects YouTube channel and, well, you'll see what you missed. So because it's quite late in the year, because it's quite late in the evening, I hope that we have your undivided attention, that you've got a glass of bubbles in hand or a rich dessert, and that you will stay with us from beginning to end, because this really is a fascinating and really informative journey. Now, Carbon Connects is a fantastic project. You all know about it. It gathers partners from 6 countries, the UK, Ireland, Germany, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And the aim with its very diverse pilot schemes is to reduce the high carbon footprint of peatland soils in Northwest Europe by introducing specifically new bio-based business models developed for sustainable land management practices. Now, as you may know, probably know, or don't know much, peatland restoration can contribute significantly to the world's journey to net zero carbon emissions. So when they're healthy, they act as incredible carbon stores, potential carbon sinks, but if allowed to degrade, they threaten biodiversity, they release pollutants into the environment, they can impact very negatively on climate change mitigation and adaptation goals. So draining peatland occurs in pretty much all the member states, and it's not surprising that the EU is a whopping, well, the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions from drained peatlands. So that's about 15% of global peatland emissions. Now, the speakers, farmers and researchers and those involved in the pilots in the last virtual event last Tuesday explained the challenges and the solutions and the opportunities open to farmers, open to landowners if they evolve their farming practices and maintain rather than drain peatlands. And they talk through all the sorts of technical support and financial support and the diverse business models that are there and the real life examples of farmers who are testing all of this out and have already made a change. In the next 90 minutes, we're going to further explore different kinds of business models and, very importantly, diverse examples of Paludiculture in action. And we're going to present some of the core tools at your disposal if you are really interested in engaging in these practices that, as I said, help mitigate climate change, but importantly, don't compromise earning a good living while doing it. So a lot to get through. Our speakers will address you by video. There's several parts to this program and each will offer something different. We're going to look at the tools to support Paludiculture. We're going to look at examples of reed and cattail. We've got a really interesting step-by-step insight into a fantastic UK peat moss project. It's a pilot. And then at the end, I think it will be about 21:15, well, that's Brussels time. We'll get 4 or 5 of those speakers to join us. So if you've got questions, stick them at any point in the Q&A, keep them super, super short. Say to whom they're addressed and who you are, if you like. But super short is very, very important. And it can be in any language. Of course, you can tweet at any time. We've got 2 hashtags. We've got Peatlands Matter or Sustainable Peatlands. Okay, that's it. I'm going to be very strict on time, and that means keeping myself strict in terms of how much I talk. Let's get stuck into the content and hear from the first of our expert speakers. Let's call him a VIP from the CANAPE project. He'll tell you the meaning of that acronym. He'll tell you who's in the project. He'll tell you what it's all about. His name is Harry Mach, and he's the lead officer for climate mitigation at the Broads Authority, working in the Broads National Park in the UK. So let's have a listen. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Harry Mach, the project coordinator of the Creating a New Approach to Peatland Ecosystems project. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation this evening. I'm going to talk to you for about 10 minutes. I'll take you through what CANAPE is, I'll also talk to you about something called a carbon pocket guide and where we are on that process. Starting off, what is CANAPE? So CANAPE stands for Creating a New Approach to Peatland Ecosystems. It's an Interreg North Sea region funded program covering 5 countries around the North Sea, involving 14 partners, all working in one form or another with lowland peat. Just so you've got kind of a grounding in the types of landscapes we're working in. So starting in Belgium, we're working in a raised bog in the Grenspark on the border of the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we're working on the lakes and fens in Friesland and Groningen. In Germany, we're looking at building Paludiculture sites in former bogs, drained bogs in the MEYER basin in Lower Saxony. In Denmark, we're working in the drained raised bogs in northern Jutland at Lille Wildmoss and Store Wildmoss. And in the UK, we're working on fenland sites and lakes in the Broads National Park in eastern England. I'm not going to take you through all of our sites this evening. I'm going to focus on those that are working on alternative methods of agriculture on wetland sites. But to give you an overview of CANAPE as a project, there's over 90 hectares of restoration in the project, focusing on piloting new methods and acting as demonstrators for wider restoration types. That will achieve, we aim, at least 1,000 tonnes of CO2 savings per year. At the same time, we're also working on 2 restorations of lakes that are in the peatland system, so working on the overall water cycle within peatland between land and water. There'll be 3 pilot wetland farms built within the project, and we'll have a range of wetland agricultural products to sort of demonstrate and to get people engaged and look at what we can do with the products from these wetland farms. Firstly, I'd like to take you over to Germany and our pilot sphagnum farm in Lower Saxony. Sphagnum is, as you see in the picture center, it's a moss plant that grows in bogs, generally in acidic conditions, although there are a couple of alkaline varieties of it. It can be used as an alternative substrate for plants that are typically grown in peat moss. So as particularly in the UK is currently banning peat extraction for garden composting, so there'll be a demand for materials that can replace that, have similar chemical qualities, so that is one area it can be used. It can be also used as a decoration material. It can be used in terrania for if you grow reptiles and you keep them in a glass tank, it's quite often used as a bedding material. And at the moment it tends to be harvested from South America from natural bogs, so that's obviously a chance to replace it from materials taken from wild spaces. It can also potentially be used up and as a natural cleaner for collecting pollutants from water bodies, and at the moment actually one of the big markets for it will be as a seed material for wider restoration. If you look at countries like the UK that have a target of rewetting 50,000 hectares of peatland, similarly in Germany and other countries have very significant plans for rewetting of bogs, they will need a lot of seed material, and that's where these farms have a real potential. In terms of farming technique, this is quite an intensive form of farming as a kind of starting point. You need quite a good growing surface. So you can see here we had to level quite a large polder, so this is 1 hectare of land that's under irrigation here. We're currently constructing a second polder. So I like to note for size of scale, these little green dots you can see in the corner, they're people wearing high-vis jackets. So that's just to give you a sense of the scale of this site. Once it's established, it establishes as a permanent crop. So you can take a harvest off it every couple of years, but you don't need to reseed it. And depending on the value of material that can be gathered for some of these more niche uses such as a substrate, there is clear potential for this to be sold at quite a high value. Moving quickly on to our next site to discuss. This is in the Broads National Park in the UK. This is a fen site, so it's alkaline, so it wouldn't be suitable for sphagnum farming. The land around it has been used for cattle grazing for some time, so grass fens, and then where there are still some natural sites around it, they are very much dominated by reed, by Phragmites reed. This site is very much a demonstration site. It's not large enough to be a commercial farm on its own. but it'll be trialling 3 different crops in 5 polders. So it'll be trialing reed phragmites. So that is the crop you see in the center, being delivered on the truck, ready to be planted. It'll be growing typha latifolia, which is a highly versatile biomass source, and you've got to talk later from Aldert van Weeren, so I won't spend too much time talking about what can be done with that, as he is Mr. Typha. And we'll also be trying to grow canary grass, which can be used as a cattle fodder. But what's quite interesting about this site is it also is a neat demonstration of the way you can start layering up benefits and potentially other things than just crops that can be sold. So this picture is looking south to the south you can see a water body, which is a nature reserve called Horsey Mere. The channel to the right of the picture, which runs into that, is a drainage channel, so water is pumped out of the surrounding landscape into that channel and tends to draw quite a lot of pollutants with it, partly eutrophication from the farms, but also ochre, so iron oxide mixed in with soil drawn from the soils underneath, which is quite iron oxide rich. So this site will then draw water from the southern end. So the water flowing north to south along the channel, it draws water in around here. It'll then pump it through these 5 polders, each one having some level of cleaning. So the typha will be in the first polders, which will take the nutrients out of the water, and then it will reintroduce it to the dike up here. And it'll be quite interesting to see if this has enough of a cleaning effect on the water flowing through the dike that that's something we can potentially market to water bodies. Such as the local water company or your water board, depending where you are, which is quite interesting for us, particularly as this site actually, eventually the water from here will drain into a river that is used to provide the water supply for the town of Great Yarmouth. So clearly there's some value if we can start to clean that up, and there's already been some experiments with reverse auctions in the area, so it could feed into that. This site will also be utilised by a project called GGR, which is looking at the greenhouse gas removals opportunities in the UK. So we'll be monitoring it with some gas chambers to start demonstrating potentially also, along with the crops you're producing, the water cleaning services, these sites have a potential for carbon crediting, and that sort of layering up in benefits to make it more attractive to farmers. The third site I'd like to talk to you about is in Denmark, in Store Vildmos. So Vildmos translates to wild moor. This is formerly one of the largest raised bogs in Europe that has been drained and converted for agriculture, but does still have a mixture of natural sites left. So you can see to the right of the picture you have a more natural area. To the left you have grass areas used for grazing, and to the top of the picture you have some areas still used for potato farming. So this site is on a former potato field, and it's been converted to trial again. It'll have phragmites, it will have typha. You can see it under construction in the picture with a tractor in the center of the screen here, just again to give you an idea of the scale. This site is focusing very much on trying to demonstrate the low cost end, so the low level of intervention. So these polders are fed without needing pumps, trying to use gravity from the adjacent ditch and trying to manage that water level in as cheap a way as possible. It also serves as wider inspiration, so this site will be developed further to have several hundred hectares of restoration in the coming years, based in part from the farmers' engagement that's been done here. One of the extra products that will be tried here is that the local university is trying protein extraction from the grasses to see if this can be a source of protein, potentially for animal feed, so just giving kind of another avenue to market of the crops that have been grown here. Yeah, and kind of making it therefore more economically attractive if that is something we can get out of it, particularly as there is a need for more plant-based proteins. Is something that I think most environmental movements have identified. Just as the last one, very quickly, this isn't specifically a farmed crop, but it's of interest in terms of managing waste from the sites. So in the Broads National Park, there is a lot of removal of wood from sites. From nature reserves where there's a need to essentially remove trees to keep the landscape open for certain species that rely on that open landscape. which means there's a very significant amount of waste wood around the Broads. Typically that's burned, nothing is done with it, it leads to pollution, it's not very attractive and not the best advertisement for ourselves as an environmentally friendly organisation, or with our partner organisations have the same challenge. So we purchased a charcoal burner and managed to produce some high quality charcoal with it, which is being retailed locally, and this is just sort of converting what was entirely waste material into a high value product that's been very successful with a local partner called Fairhaven Water Garden, and it'll be interesting to see if this can be carried out sustainably on a long-term basis. Where this fits to our next steps and what we want to do next and start pulling this learning together, we're very conscious that there's a large amount of tools coming together, so things like the site emissions tool that I believe was presented last week. We'll have endless reports from our pilot sites. There's been various project conferences. There is a significant body of literature building up about paludiculture, particularly coming out of places like the MEYER Centre, but lots of other places as well. And we're aware that in the centre of this we have farmers and landowners, and it's not necessarily the easiest way to communicate with people and to get the message out. So what we're targeting is the development of a straightforward guide that can fit into someone's pocket, that will basically put them in the situation where they can decide if they can begin their paludiculture journey. And this will aim to pull all the learning from several projects into one space, and will be something that can be given out very quickly to farmers. It'll be no more than, say, 2,500, 3,000 words long, and be your very easy how-to guide to paludiculture that you can pick up. You can learn if this is something that at an outline level is viable for your farm, or if it's something actually it isn't worth exploring further, it won't work with what you've got or the landscape you work with. And then from there we can build it up into from there you can build it up, and this is where you can start having your conversation with your local advisors and then going down the journey towards more sustainable farming, if that is what is for you. So this will be developed over the next 12 months and tested with our stakeholder groups of farmers. So we have these groups in Germany, in Denmark, in the UK, it's sort of all around. We have these groups set up, and we'll aim to launch it in the second half of 2022, and that can develop into the next phase of projects, and we hope that this will be the inspiration for a longer term change in the way wetlands are farmed in Europe. I'll be available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
There's always one who doesn't take themselves off mute, and that was actually me that time. So warm thanks to Harry. I love that. Harry, he actually could have been live there. So beautiful was that presentation. It felt so authentically live. And as he said there, he will be joining us at about 9:15 when we have the Q&A. Can you please make sure that you stick your question in the Q&A channel, as opposed to the chat, the Q&A. Anything in French I can deal with, anything in English, obviously. German, yeah, and Dutch, I'm not so brilliant. So I trust that the speakers themselves will answer directly, or if the team behind the scenes fancies doing a little bit of translation, they are absolutely welcome. So that's got you started. Some fantastically interesting stuff there. I'm particularly taken, I think you can hear I'm a bit of a fangirl, by how polyvalent this is. So fascinating, not least the testing by the local university in terms of protein extraction from the grass as a potential for animal feed, all the different uses there, which I think a lot of you know, the substrate, the insulation, there are plenty more. And then just this work they did, with the charcoal burner, and then were able to sell that high value locally. I mean, such a wealth of different opportunities, fascinating, and also heads up again to the booklet that will be available in the second half of next year. Now, our next speaker is Julius MEYER. He comes from the University of Marbourg, and he's going to take you through another tool which is available now. It's just reaching finalization, but it's a beautifully evolving tool. It's called the Carbon-toolbox, fantastic online repository of both information and inspiration for absolutely anyone wanting to jump on the paludiculture bandwagon. So let's have a listen while he talks you through this delightful and very useful tool. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Julius MEYER. I'm from the University of Marbourg, and I will be presenting to you the Carbon Toolbox, which we have been developing over the course of the last couple of years within the Carbon Connects project. So just a little overview over the contents, which I will be going through in the next couple of minutes. First of all, I'll give you a little overview of why we actually created the Carbon Toolbox, what is the purpose behind it, who was involved into the creation of it. And afterwards, we will dive into the contents of the toolbox, and then I will give you a little guide. So I have prepared some screenshots so that hopefully after I give you this guide, you will know how to use the toolbox in the future. And lastly, I will give you a small overview over what we're having or what we're planning for the future with the Carbon Toolbox. Since it isn't really a finished product as of now, but we see it more as of a process and a thing which will always keep developing, hopefully, and be growing through new inputs in the upcoming years. So what exactly is the Carbon Toolbox? It is an internet platform containing various informations and tools regarding rewetted agriculture. These informations have been gathered through a variety of projects, not only Carbon Connects, but also in collaboration with different EU-wide projects such as CAREPEAT, CANAPE, Peatlife, and Green Economy as well. And it has been developed over the last 3 years. So it actually began its development with the start of the original Carbon Connects project and was collated by the UMR and VHL in cooperation with all these different partners from Carbon Connects and the other projects. So what is the actual purpose of the toolbox? The ultimate goal here is to provide assistance to climate-proof peatlands use practices in Northwest Europe, therefore leading to provide alternate income sources through restored peatlands, which means that the peatland farmers don't only have income through the different products which they produce in their sustainable form of peatland land use, but also have an alternative form of income by reducing their GHG emissions and through different schemes, such as, for example, carbon credits through the reduction of their emissions. There's a bunch of different people who we want to target with this Carbon Toolbox, as for instance, landowners and farmers, as well as experts, the general public, higher education or research, which also work with sustainability and peatlands, but also potential buyers who are interested into the peatland products or the peatland products, as well as policymakers. And what we also want to achieve with this toolbox is to build a network of various stakeholders so that we can really bring together all these different stakeholders and develop this scene and really push it forward. But more to this later. So quickly a run through the contents of the toolbox as of how you will also see it in the menu of the toolbox. I will show you in just a second. The first chapter is about the relevance of sustainable peatland use, sustainable use of peatlands, which just gives a quick introduction into why sustainable use of peatlands is actually necessary or a good thing and how one should approach it. The second chapter is the toolbox use, which pretty much talks about how, or gives you a tutorial on how to use the toolbox and how to navigate it. The third chapter is going to be the components of the toolbox. Here we actually get into the deep content or the different tools of the toolbox. The first chapter being restoration and conservation of peatlands, then followed by paludiculture, livestock, the different incomes one can have through the peatlands, and the last point also being peatland monitoring. Afterwards, there's a chapter regarding the policy recommendations, followed by a sort of a learning platform in the training chapter, and lastly, the network, which I already just mentioned. All right, now to the guide of the toolbox. Here we have a screenshot of the very first page of the toolbox. So as you guys can see on the left of the page, we have the menu where you can navigate and click through the different pages. And on the right, you always have the texts. And it's always a mixture of texts, images, as well as videos, which you can click on, and different links, which are web links you can click through. So you really could just like go ahead and explore and see for yourself what you can do with this, with all these articles and videos. And yeah, regarding the menu on the left, we have a couple of points which have drop-down menus. As you can see here, for example, when you click on components of the toolbox, a couple of drop-down menus open, such as restoration and conservation, paludiculture, and livestock. And there, in this case, I've also further clicked on the other drop-down menu regarding the paludiculture, and a bunch of different chapters open up in the bottom. And then you can click on these individual chapters and open them individually. Here, as for example, we can see is cattail and bulrush. Once you click on it, the chapter opens and you can read through this article about this, about cattail and bulrush. And what we have done with the articles is we have also included web links to the different, to the literature, which means that if you really want to read further into this information, or there's something which is maybe still unclear, you can simply click on the web link, which is right in the text, as you can see here in blue, which are the different web links. So you can simply click on them and yes, read into further information. In some pages, you can also scroll to the very bottom, and there's also little chapters with additional sources or further reading, but not on every page. It really depends on the article. Here's another example of one chapter, incomes, with the different business models, which we're showing as, for example, installation and building, growing substrates, livestock, energy, food medicinal, and composting and soil improvers. Here you can also click through the different images and open up individual little chapters describing these incomes. Here's another example one example for a tool which we also have as an alternative to the different texts, which is the site emissions tool. This is a tool which has been or was developed in the Carbon Connects projects as well. And it really helps people to pretty much figure out how many emissions they have on their peatlands, and how much they can reduce these peatlands if they're willing to transform them, and thus resulting they can see how many carbon credits they can gain through this, and yes, receive additional income, which is really helpful. Yes, and one can simply click on this button, download the site and emissions tool, and you will receive this tool. Then moving on, this is the training part, which is called the Peat Experience Activity Town. This is currently still under work, so this is not completely done yet, but the concept is it stands and it's near to completion. This is an online learning environment, which is primarily directed at a younger audience. So one would say at like university students between the age of 18 and 25, or other younger people which are interested in sustainable use of peatlands. And generally it consists of 5 main spaces, providing access to different sets of activities and informations. These 5 spaces you can see at the bottom of this image right here, which are the town hall, university, city bank, museum, and shop. And once this Peat Experience Activity Town is completed, you will be able to click through these different spaces, receiving different content, information, and activities regarding these little chapters. So it's going to be a very interactive form of learning about peatlands. All right, and now to the last point of the Carbon Toolbox as of now is the network. So what we're hoping to achieve with the network, as I already mentioned earlier, is to really connect a lot of stakeholders to further push collaborations and especially also help landowners and farmers who really want to transform their peatlands so that they can receive help and talk to different experts, or maybe to people who already have experience in this field, and really create a platform where people can exchange, give each other tips, and talk about their experiences, expertise, knowledge, and so on. So I would really encourage everybody to log into this or sign up to this network. It's really quite simple. As you can see here in this screenshot, here on the right, you put in your information and then you type in which type of stakeholder you are, and then that's already pretty much it. We will also send out some invites to this network, so yeah, you will get another reminder on this. So what are the future plans of the toolbox? First of all, we want to finalize the missing content as of now, but it's nearly completed. Right now, the peat experience activity town still has to be completed, and then we're pretty much done. But as I already mentioned earlier, the entire toolbox is pretty much a work in progress. So we really want to add and update content in the future, since this is really a field where still a lot of projects are gaining information from. So we're going to be updating this toolbox also with the capitalization, which has just started and is going on for the next 2 years. With Carbon Connects, we're still going to be adding content to this toolbox, and of course we want to expand the network, hopefully always add new members, and really enforce or help out with the connection of these different stakeholders. All right, then that was it. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to Julius there and Julius there. And again, just to say, very important, I love that. It is an evolving online platform. It's kind of a living lab. I mean, it's nearly there, but it will be consistently updated and consistently evolved. But of course, it does need you to do that. So if you're interested, that is really critical. And I think as a moderator, it's my job to reinforce some of the main messages from the organizers of this event, from the Carbon Connects project, and that it really, really is. Please do sign up and have a look. It's brilliant. And I think you can see that even without the interactivity, it obviously, when you look at it, it's all going to come to life. One important thing I just want to underline, which you saw right at the start of the presentation, there was this issue of policy, because none of this makes sense, as you well know, because you're the ones who may or may not be engaging further in this without the policy support around it. And there are some critical asks, not least, well, the CAP currently subsidising for the draining of peatlands. So there does need to be policy changes. There does need to be policy changes in terms of compensating farmers for ecosystem services. So all of that is very much a part of it. So I think you will agree that it really is a very, very comprehensive tool there to help you if this is the journey that you or somebody you know wants to go on. Right, so Julius will not be at the Q&A, but the next person will be. He is called Gert-Jan van DUINEN. He is a senior scientist at Stichting Bargerveen, and I'm very sorry if I haven't delivered that in quite the best way that I should, if I haven't pronounced it correctly. And he's also guest researcher at the Radboud University, and importantly, and we'll hear this, a project leader at the Water Authority in the Southern Netherlands. So he's going to explore for us specifically Paludiculture as a sustainable solution in a climate robust landscape, and how it can help both agriculture and society at large. So let's have a listen. It's super interesting. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Gert-Jan van DUINEN. I'm working for the Water Authority AA Maas in the south of the Netherlands, and as a researcher for the Radboud University and Bargerveen Foundation. In this short presentation, I'd like to address the sustainable solution that Paludiculture is in a climate robust landscape. As you may well know, that there are huge problems with peat soils, that drainage causes the organic matter stored under wet conditions to decompose, and the carbon dioxide is emitted to the air. This also causes subsidence of soils, as you can see here in this map for the Netherlands, up to 50 centimeters until the year 2050. In addition to greenhouse gas emission, subsidence causes big problems and high costs for infrastructure and safety, as the sea level is rising and rivers continue to have peaks in their discharge. Furthermore, we experience increasing problems with water availability during longer dry periods in summer, as well as heavy rains. This causes big trouble and high costs for so-called normal agriculture. By the way, our common agricultural land use caused big losses of biodiversity. If you have to use peat soils, use them wet. Productive wet use is possible. This is called paludiculture. Raising the water table to near or above the soil surface stops subsidence, stops the greenhouse gas emission, giving farmers the opportunity to grow wet crops and do carbon farming as well. Paludiculture on peat soils and also in lower parts of the landscape offers possibilities for water retention, solving problems during periods with heavy rains and droughts. Here we transformed a drained grassland in a brook valley to a paludiculture pilot with cattail. The water level in the stream on the right is still too low, but that might be solved in the future. This picture shows the pilot site 1 year after the transformation. Working on the transformation of the drained landscape by putting paludiculture and wet crops in place in the lower parts of the landscape, shown blue on this map, we will help to develop toward a more climate robust landscape, preventing severe drought problems for agriculture and society on the more elevated part of the landscape, shown yellow and orange in this map. The red square shows the position of the pilot site with cattail. There is a long tradition and a lot of experience with reed. The use of reed on the roofs of houses is very old. Nowadays in the Netherlands, we often use reed imported all the way from Romania or even China. A more local production and application would be much more sustainable. And reed can also be used for instance, paper production, like is done in China as well. Many innovations are on their way to larger scale applications, both in the management and harvest of wet crops, and in the whole process from farmer to bringing new products on the market. Due to its special structure, cattail is suitable to substitute fossil peat in potting soil, as well as for insulation and building material. And also oyster mushrooms that normally grow on straw grow very well on cattail. Of course, there are still practical problems to be solved and issues like subsidies and regulations, but that's inevitably a matter of time. We made this funnel model to help selecting wet crops that fit well in a given situation of a landscape and water system, checking aspects like water regime, water retention, and purification, as well as the local economy and opportunities to support the ecology of the landscape. In this way, putting paludiculture in place with different crops, like peat moss, cattail, reed, and willow, we can move to a more sustainable land use and develop a more climate robust and biodiverse landscape. So let's do it. Thank you for your attention.
Like that, let's do it. And I just to pull out again a couple of things that particularly struck me there is important that Gert-Jan, who will also join us for the Q&A, said, listen, many innovations are on the way in terms of management and harvesting of crops, but also, of course, in terms of bringing products to market. And yes, he says, yeah, we need to sort the subsidies, we need to sort the regulation, it is coming. Now, all of this, the comment on reed being imported from China and Romania, we're actually going to hear more about that from our next speaker. And it's very, very interesting, and it helps understand in a more expansive way what kind of business models can be helpful, how they can be expanded. So that speaker is, of course, I think he was referred to by Harry Mach as Mr. Typha, if I'm correct. And there you see Aldert van Weeren. He's a landscaper. He works on ecotourism in a 300-year-old heritage house in the Eifel, which is a low mountain range in Western Germany and Eastern Belgium. And I just want to say one important thing, and I think you'll find that because he will also be joining us for the Q&A. He sees it as his duty to advocate simple, secure methods for minimizing drained peatland emissions and soil subsidence, while crucially allowing farmers to have both a reliable and a solid income from the many beneficial ecosystem services which cattail wetlands are offering. Now, he recently shared his experience, as I understand, on Paludiculture, peatland restoration at COP26. So have a listen now, and do, of course, catch his messages for Executive Vice President of the Commission, Frans Timmermans, the architect of the European Green Deal, because they're good ones. Let's have a listen now. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. As you see, it's a morning. When you see this film, it will be in the evening. This is a sunny, frosty morning in my home office. It should look like a cattail field, but my friends, the wild boars, have damaged part of the harvest because they like to eat the rhizomes. But this is not about meat and wild boars. This is about paludiculture and how to earn money with it. Business models. I will take two products or plants. Here behind me you see a reed bundle and a typha bundle. And those are known for a long time to be good for humans. But how can we earn money with it? When it comes to business models, it comes a lot to the current situation on the world market. A container, a shipping container from Asia to Europe costed normally, which is a year ago, about 1,500 euros to Amsterdam, Rotterdam or Antwerp. And at the moment it is about 8 times this, so it's about 10,000 euros. And this is interesting because we have to work with cheap things which are coming from China, but they are not so cheap now. So I was harvesting with a new Logic and BCS harvesting head for bundling reed in the Netherlands some days ago, and the price of a bundle of reed, which you see here, 3 millimeters, the thickness about 3 millimeters, about 1,50 meters high. This is the perfect reed for testing. The normal price was between 160 and 190 for a bundle. And at the moment the prices are €3.75. This is very good for the European reed cutters. Because there's no Chinese reed coming in. And I'm very happy for my colleagues harvesting reed. But there's something else going on. The reed dealers, which are mostly Dutch, but some Germans also, who do bulk reed selling, so enormous amounts, they also noticed that the container is not there and there is no way of making money for them. So instead of hoping that there will be more reed cutting in Europe in semi-natural agriculture like formerly drained peatlands who will be transformed to reed lands, which is possible, those reed dealers put their heads together and chartered a bulk carrier. So there's not coming 60,000 bundles in a 40-foot container. There's now coming 6 million bundles of Chinese reed on the market. They say, at least we have some reed. I would say we are again threatening the European reed cutters because prices will go down. So simple is it. There's only one hope I can have, and that's there will be a border compensation tax. So things which are transported, made or harvested with no carbon taxes on the crude oil or on the diesel driven in the trucks in China will be compensated at the border. So this means, sorry, geese coming over, this means that when something comes in, the normal taxes which are on diesel in a truck and which are not on the crude oil in the bulk carrier, which is coming over sea here, should be compensated. So there is an equal market for products from within with high energy prices, and there is be a level playing field. I hope this will be noticed by Mr. Timmermans. I think we should put our finger on it because Mr. Timmermans not only a week ago presented the carbon farming initiative, and one of the nice things we are doing is carbon farming. We are putting water on formerly drained peatlands, which is so between 15 and 21 tons less carbon emitting after it's rewetted, and we make products of it. When it comes to the reed, we all know how it works, but it works also with cattail. Some of the things we can make from cattail is this fluffy stuff here, which is flying around here. It's meant to be cavity wall installation in new buildings, but also in old buildings who have a double wall with a hollow part between it where there is air in. You can blow in this material and your walls are insulated. There's a lot of acid in it because the plant grows in water, so it doesn't really burn, which we don't like, and it takes up humidity and gives it away without rotting. It's good. The other thing is, we found out this stuff is also good for substrate. For growing mediums in Europe, 45 million cubic meters every year, and the alternatives are cocos from Pakistan and India. Expensive containers make this not possible at the moment, and rice kaf, the outside of the, we all like to eat white basmati, but the full corn has a brown sheaf around it, and they are also coming. They are coming from Vietnam mostly, and it's also too expensive in a container now. So there is currently people are asking for alternative substrates. Again, Mr. Timmermans, Green Deal. I would like carbon farming. I would like a fading out of peat in substrates, because then my product will fade in. It's not so difficult making a good running business model when the state turns some screws a little bit. We already know it functions, cattail, small particles in about 20 to 25% in a substrate. After that it's a bit difficult, but there are a lot of people working on it and there is a lot of interest in it. But both business models, for reed, for thatching and for cattail, can only work as both get the normal payments from the Common Agricultural Policy. We are standing on page 7. Paludiculture as a climate robust kind of agriculture should not be diminished by other forms of agriculture. So we are in for the same money, but I'd like to be in for a bit of more money. And maybe the carbon farming initiative can help us there with a second income on the rewetted peatlands. Things are a bit more expensive for us. It is not so easy to harvest. We need special equipment, of which a lot has to be designed and built still. It's not really functioning in a high level as maize or corn mowing, and so there is no combine for our work. There had to be done a lot, and the price harvesting per ton material will be much higher as for maize, for instance. These are things which have to be leveled out by interesting payments for ecosystem services. And paying for carbon is not so difficult because you can measure it. You can calculate it and you can measure it. And we as a Wetland Product Foundation, together with a company in the Netherlands, Strunover, are rewetting a polder in Amsterdam or north of Amsterdam. And for the rewetting, we will be paid money in a scheme which is called Aldert van Weeren, money for peat. There will be a calculation and there will be measurement and monitoring to see if we reach the goals we set for. So I'd like to have the money for the product, the money for the carbon stored in the soil, and maybe also captured by the plants, because the plants use carbon dioxide from the air and make this by photosynthesis in the plant as a carbon. 10 tons of dry typha is 4 tons of carbon, which is 14.7 tons of carbon dioxide from the air, and what's left over is oxygen, which we also need. So there is a possibility, and I think states should turn some screws on border compensation tax on less peat or fading out peat in substrates, and then there will be a lot to do for local biomass. And with that, I say greetings to France.
I like that. Very, very good. And thank you so very much. I have to say to Aldert that I really wish, I think he said, my home office. I wish my home office looked like that, genuinely, and love the bit when the geese went flying over. Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. And really delighted that he can be with us, because that's really interesting. So if you've got any more questions on those emerging business models, you know, he did say there, okay, the equipment's more expensive. You know, I think that we would be interesting if we could have payments for ecosystem services, because we do have higher costs. So I'd like to have a level playing field. And very, very interesting what he explained right at the outset again, in terms of what was coming from China, but it's too costly now, and therefore what could favour those who are producing reed and for the market in Europe. So having much more of a level playing field because of those costs and that wish that there would be a border compensation tax. Let's see. But anyway, he's the expert, not me. So if you have any questions on any of those topics, of course, please do stay with us. I can see there's a few questions coming in the Q&A. Now we've got 3 more speakers. Let me introduce the first of them. Please do stay with us. As I said, lovely audience. I can see there's a good 63 people with us still, so nobody's dropping off. The next speaker, as you see there, is Maarten De BOEVER. He's a soil and water management expert, and he's working as a researcher on soil, organic carbon, but specifically on modelling carbon stocks in agricultural soils. Now, he studies the possibilities of biomass valorization from re-wetted agricultural land, and he is going to talk us through that, this valorization of biomass, specifically talking us through farm composting using reed and other biomass from re-wetted land. So let's have a listen again. Really fascinating and beautifully done. So as I will say to the lovely ladies behind the scenes, take it away, please.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Maarten De BOEVER from ILVO, so from the Institute of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries Research in Flanders, Belgium. And during this webinar, Farming on Peatlands, Business Models of Paludiculture, I will talk about farm composting using reed and other biomass from rewetted land. So yeah, we are not really looking at business models really for agriculture and wet areas or applying paludiculture, but we are more looking at like what with the biomass coming from peatlands, from wet areas, from wetlands, what can we do with this biomass? And here then the topic of farm composting. So to introduce you in brief, we have in Flanders in the Carbon Connects project 2 pilot sites in West Flanders. So first of all, we have a small nature area in Kwetshagen, close to Jabbeke. And then a second one, which we will talk about tonight, then the Blankaart, which is about 900 hectares. And it's located close to Diksmuir. So both are rather close to the North Sea. And in the Blankaart, so we have like 1/3 of the area, so 300 hectares, which is privately owned area. So it's owned by the farmers and they use it. It's like meadows and they are also used for extensive grazing. And those are the more high laying areas, so less wet areas. But then also you have like 2/3 of the area under nature management. So that is the area in green. That are the lower laying areas in the pilot site, the Blankaart. And there it's like an agreement between farmers and nature organizations. And the nature organization here is Natuurpunt. So the farmers can use the land for free and in return they manage the land. So they will maintain the land, so they will mow it, so they will harvest the biomass and they can use it themselves as a feedstock or for something else. But also in the Blankaart, they are rising the water levels. So, and that means also that the biomass from those low laying areas can be harvested later and later in the year. So yeah, then it's beginning of the summer or even in September. And then also the biomass is less suitable to give to the animals, for example. So what else can we do with the biomass coming from those area? So that's what it's all about. So it's a high diversity of biomass available in those wetlands, but how can we valorize it? So especially on those low areas with land mostly unsuitable for agricultural use, there's still this biomass coming from it. What can we do with it? And then farm composting comes into play. And what is farm composting? It's turning organic waste into stable organic matter and nutrients on farm. So, and important to know is that often carbon-rich woody biomass is lacking. So there, the cooperation between farmers and nature organizations giving those more carbon-rich material can be very interesting. And then also something about legislation in farm composting in Flanders. So for the moment, farmers can only use their own material as an input for farm composting, but they are doing some adjustments in the legislation in Flanders, so making it possible that farm composting can be done in a collaborative way. So with a maximum of 3 partners, including also those nature organizations. So things are shifting, so making it possible, this cooperation between farmers and nature organizations. And what is composting, the farm composting, the process? So we need, of course, the feedstock, so green material. That can be the farmyard manure from the farm itself, also crop residues, grass clippings, and then leafy residues. And then also brown materials, which are the carbon-rich materials like wood chips, straw, and those brown materials can also come from the nature area. And then to have a good composition, we need like 60 on a volume based way percentage of brown material and the other part 40% of green materials. So a good composition is important. And the composting can be done on farm or on the headlands of parcels. And then, of course, yeah, we need also a compost turner, which is being played here or given here in green, to turn the compost, also to control the process, because this is very important to control like temperature. It cannot be too high, maximum like 65 degrees. Then there need to be enough oxygen available. So the level of CO2 inside can be maximum 16. And then also we need a good moisture content. And with this compost turner, we can control this process in a good way. And then in 2020, we had like different raw materials coming from the nature area. We have left upper corner. We have then the soft rush. And then also this is then harvested with the soft track. Then we have in the middle picture, we have the reed, and then the right picture, we have like the willow wood chips that were available from the nature area to be used. So we have like some interesting carbon-rich materials which can be used to make a good farm compost. So we set up like 2 compost piles at pilot site, the Blankaart. So the first one really following the book, like 40% like green materials, straw manure, and then like 60% of more brown material, the wood chips, the reed, and then also soft rush. And like the C/N ratio from the starting compost should be between 25 and 35 ideally. So that is good here in this case too. And a second compost pile, we just want to look at if it's possible to only use materials coming from the nature area itself, like 50% reed and 50% soft rush, but not really following the rules of like 40% green and 60% brown materials. But it was just another experiment if it was possible or not. So here we see the process. So the picture at the left here. So we put this willow wood chips at the bottom, and then in between there's always like the materials from the nature area, like the soft rush or also the reed. And then on top we put like this straw manure. And then, of course, with this compost turner, it will be nicely mixed. And also, in total, it will be turned like 5 or 6 times. So here we see in the middle picture the compost turner and also the heat and then the water vapor escaping from the compost pile. And when the compost is finished, we can put a cover on it that still heat and water vapor can escape, but avoid that too much water from rain is entering those compost piles. And then also the process. So the process, like the temperature and function of time. So we had like, especially in the beginning, so really high rise in temperature above 65. So then it is really needed to turn the compost. When it's also too dry, we need to add water, so a water gift. But then we need a good and high temperature at the start to also have this hygienization of the compost, so to kill also this bad seeds from weeds. And then also the CO2 level never exceeded 16%, so we had a good structure, so everything went well over there for the 2 compost piles. So then the compost product. So both compost piles, we have a very stable end product. So we see like the dry matter content is rather low. So it was a little too wet, the end product, but nevertheless, we have like more than half of dry matter is organic matter, so which is very interesting to use as a material to add to the soil, in the framework of carbon sequestration. And it's a stable product that we can see on the oxygen uptake rate. So it's between 8 and 13, where we limit for compost is like 15. It's a stable product with a low biodegradability. So that is very good. And then also the C/N ratio is like that of the soil organic matter. Also very good, and a high C/phosphor ratio, so we can add a lot of carbon, but then luckily, of course, then also the phosphor will be quite low. And then also the maturity level of the compost, so which is given by the nitrate over ammonia ratio. So it's higher than 1. So we have a mature compost, so and the nitrification process is achieved. And almost, we can say in the compost product, almost all phosphor is recovered, but some nitrogen, typically 5 to 20%, can be lost during the composting process or the composting, mostly by gaseous emissions. So to summarize, so we have this farm composting. It's a win-win for farmers and nature organizations. So it's an on-farm recycling of nutrients, and we will also valorize biomass, which is not suitable as a feedstock, for example, or sorry, as to feed their cattle, to valorize biomass coming from those wetlands. And then we have a good final product we can use as an soil improver. And then we have a qualitative compost, which can be made also only with biomass coming from those wetlands, which is good. And this on-farm composting, it's important, especially if we do it in or near a nature reserve, to control the process, to limit nutrient losses through leaching and also through volatilization. Thank you very much.
And a warm thank you to Martin there. And honestly, I could watch all of these videos so many times. I would still be super, super fascinated. I can see that the audience numbers are increasing and then holding. So I want to just give you a quick heads up. First, please do put questions in the Q&A. Second, we will reach that Q&A at about 21:24. We've got 2 more videos. Please don't go away. I'm going to run that Q&A like an intellectual game show. This event will hold as long as you have questions, but I would like you to meet the speakers live. As you can see, they've done a tremendous job, and you might want to just pose them a few quick questions. So do please stay with us. Now, we have a short video here. So as I said, we have 2 more. The next one actually features an interview on paludiculture with reeds from a farmer in Flanders. So let's have a listen to his experience. I'm going to give the lovely team, there we go.
We zitten hier in het natuurgebied de Blankaart in Omen. Ik heb de boerderij overgenomen in 1998 van mijn ouders. Mijn ouders was een gemengd bedrijf van varkens, vleesvee en melkvee. In 2002 hebben we een aanvraag ingediend voor een varkensstal uit te breiden, maar was geweigerd in de stad Exmuid omwille van dat ze liever hier geen varkensuitbreiding wilden in het gebied de Blankaart. Dus we hebben dan eigenlijk gekozen voor een uitbreiding in vleesvee. Hebben we dan ook overgestapt met natuurpunt naar een obrakdier die in dat natuurgebied, in die natuurgrasland wilde begrazen. Op het moment dat wij een 6 of een 8-tal dieren geslacht en dat was eigenlijk geen succes. En dan hebben we gekeken toen eigenlijk voor de dieren eigenlijk, dat ik had dan, het vleesvee eigenlijk verder op de goede perceel, op de goede weilanden eigenlijk op te brengen en eigenlijk de koeien ook. Wat ik eigenlijk met akkerland omgevormd had, gedeeltelijk naar grasland, voor beter grasland. En in die akkerland te krijgen voor mijn koeien, voor de melkproductie. Anders in die natuurgrasland, waar je daar dieren of koeien opsteekt eigenlijk, heb je plannen van 20 à 25 liter per koe per dag en nog 10 liter. En daardoor hebben we eigenlijk dan in 2009 een omschakeling gemaakt naar een ijsverwerking op de ijsboerderij. In 2019 zaten we nog met rond de 200 dieren op bedrijf. Nu zitten we op bij rond de 75 koeien. En de rest is de jongvee voor melkvee en ook vleesvee, jongvee en oudere dieren meer dan 2 jaar. Mijn velden of akkers op rond de 3, 24, 25 hectare. Heb ik nu nog maïsteelt, tarwe, grasland, grasklaver dat ik plaatsen, voerbieten voor de koeien. En dat is een beetje anders dan we vroeger nog teelten van groenten en allemaal staan, waardoor we per se minder en minder in het gebied mogen bemesten en allemaal. Is het akkerland nou juist voorzien voor teelten eigenlijk, voor de dieren, voor zowel vleesvee of melkvee. Met Natuurpunt hebben we een contract en een beheersovereenkomst, maar er zaten veel stukken in dat we eigenlijk vroeger een pacht hadden van eigenaars. Maar die toen de pacht moeten aftekenen en dat eigenlijk verkocht wist via de VLM en een overschakeling dan gemaakt naar Natuurpunt of doorgegeven wist naar Natuurpunt. En die percelen beheren we nog met alle normen die erop zijn. Ja, laat maaien, vroeg maaien, het ene jaar begrazen, het andere jaar maaien. Het is een afwisseling. We zijn er een heel stuk graslanden eigenlijk ontnomen geweest. Wat we nu aan het kijken zijn naar die ruwe graslanden, voor te kijken dat we niet meer kunnen gebruiken voor de dieren of voor te strooien. Dat we nu aan het kijken zijn met VLM, met ILVO voor de compostering. We hebben 1 jaar proef gedraaid en we zijn nu aan het kijken voor een vergunning te krijgen voor dat eigenlijk meerdere volumes om te vormen van riet en pietrust naar ruwe graslanden. Graslanden die niet meer kunnen gemaaid worden in een nat gebied. Dat we nu gaan kijken eigenlijk voor van gras naar compost te maken. We staan ervoor open en we hebben ervoor gehoord daarnaar. We hebben de resultaten geboekt dat we zeggen, wauw, we hadden dat onderschat dat het eigenlijk niet kon eigenlijk. Of we dachten dat we dan niet van die ruwe graslanden eigenlijk een hele mooie compost daarvan te maken. En we gaan kijken in de toekomst voor er meer ons op te baseren, voor die graslanden toch te kunnen maaien in perceel. Het gaan altijd percelen zijn die niet meer kunnen gemaaid worden. Gaan we daarvoor moeten speciale toestellen op die percelen steken voor te maaien, dat weet men niet. Maar ik denk eigenlijk dat in de toekomst meer en meer ruwere grassen gaan zijn. De landbouwbedrijven vallen ook wel meer en meer weg. Grote bedrijven zijn niet meer op zoek op zuivere grassen. We kaderen ons, ik ga niet zeggen we kaderen ons daarin eigenlijk. We kijken naar de toekomst. Het is beter dat we nu al daaraan beginnen of dat we bij 2, 3 jaar of 5 jaar gaan starten daarmee als het kalver verdronken is. We maken dat we ietsje voor zijn en dat we kijken dat we met goede personen in zee gaan. En het is een ervaring dat we moeten in het hele gebied, we weten niet welke kant dat op gaat, maar we zien dat het extremer kan. Vooral de natte periode dat we nu hebben eigenlijk, met 2 droge perioden gehad, 2 droge zomers gehad, dat we de percelen bijna allemaal kunnen maaien hebben. Maar nu zitten we met een extreme natte periode. Als je volgend jaar gaan we het volgend jaar kunnen maaien, vele percelen, we weten het allemaal niet. Het is de natuur die boert.
Blah. There we go. Let me just make sure I'm off mute. So very, very interesting there. And I think, well, you heard the message at the end, and that's something probably that our speakers can expand upon. It seems to be like a sort of a perfect storm here. And preparing for the future is really is the way forward. And I'd like to hear a little bit more on that when they join us live. But let me first invite our final expert to lay out her stall by video again. Her name is CARTMELL-DONE. She's a field officer at the North Pennines AONB Partnership. So she's working on restoring degraded upland blanket bogs in the north of England. And she's also working as a peatland restoration officer in northern England on eroding bare peat sites. It's a really fascinating walkthrough. It's a real step-by-step process of using sphagnum in UK upland peatland restoration. So have a listen, it's fabulous.
Hi everyone, my name's CARTMELL-DONE and I work for the peatland restoration team at the North Pennines AONB Partnership. Today I'm going to talk to you about how we use sphagnum in our upland peatland restoration. We're based in the north of England and we restore mainly degraded upland blanket bogs. The North Pennines AONB Partnership have now been restoring peatlands for over 15 years and we've developed a 5-step process that works really well. A lot of our sites look like the one in the photo, so they're very severely degraded, they have a lot of bare peat and they have a lot of very deep erosion gullies. The 5-step process aims to slow the flow of water off the moors, reducing flooding, and also to stabilise the bare peat and encourage revegetation to limit the amount of carbon emissions. To do this we use the 5 steps that you can see here. So the first one is installing leaky dams, usually made of stone or coir, to try and increase the water table depth and restore the hydrology of the site. We then try and reprofile any really steep slopes, so reducing the angle of severe hag edges to encourage revegetation. We then use heather brash, and this is probably the most important step for us. It's where we cut heather and other types of vegetation from healthier areas of the site, and then we use that cut material and spread it over the top of the bare peat, and it acts like a mulch. It stabilizes the peat, it stops it eroding any further, and it enables other plant species to be able to grow. To boost that revegetation process, we then use lime to raise the pH, fertilizer and some seed as well, just to try and speed things up. And then the final step in the process is reintroducing sphagnum moss to try and make sure that we've got the right mix of species and the right basis for a good blanket bog vegetation community. Sphagnum moss is a really important blanket bog species. It's a primary peat builder, so it's important to healthy functioning bogs to enable them to continue to lay down peat. It's also important for carbon sequestration and water storage, so helping to tackle climate change and flooding. Also helps to tackle wildfire, which is a really big issue up here. And finally, it also helps to facilitate the colonisation of other species, which is really important on bare sites when we're trying to speed up that process of revegetation. So we reintroduce it onto restoration sites in the areas that it's lacking. We plant it in amongst the brash that we spread over bare peat, and it just helps to speed up that process and make sure we get sphagnum moss back into the vegetation community much more quickly. So we use a variety of different methods for reintroducing sphagnum onto restoration sites. The first one is sphagnum clumps. These are harvested from donor sites rather than bought in, and we harvest them by hand. We have to get consent from Natural England, who are the governing body who look after designated sites in England. And once we've got that consent, we'll go ahead and harvest and take out handfuls of sphagnum, where we try and limit it to 1 clump every 2 meters squared. So it minimises the impact that we have on the donor site, and we tend to focus on sphagnum capitofolium, papilosum and palustra because those are the most common species here in the North Pennines. We then bag them up and transport them onto the restoration site, and then we'll plant them into a depression that we make with the heel of your boot, and then plant the clump into that depression and compact the peat around it so that it's planted firmly. This is just a photo to demonstrate that the impact that we have on donor sites is really minimal. It's very hard to tell where we've been harvesting from. So this is a before and then immediately after we've harvested a clump. Another method that we use is sphagnum plugs. These are micropropagated and commercially produced by specialist nurseries that we buy them off. We buy a mixture of species that is tailored to the North Pennines, but you can buy various different species mixes based on where you're planning to plant them. So they come supplied in a paper roll like this, and you just unravel the roll and then take out the individual plugs, and then create a hole using a rod or a dibber and plant the plug into the peat. We also use sphagnum fragments, so these are similar to the clumps. We harvest them in the same way from the donor site, and then once we've got the bags full of clumps, instead of planting them as whole clumps, we'll then break them up further into smaller fragments, and this is to enable the sphagnum to cover a larger surface area than it would if it was just clumps or plugs. And then we then spread that sphagnum onto bare peat or onto the ground. So in this photo here you can see we're actually spreading it onto a heather cut, because this site is really dominated by heather and has very little understory vegetation or other species present. So we then cover it back over with the cut heather, with the heather brash, and that helps to keep the sphagnum moist and protect it from weathering or blowing away or anything like that. And then in theory it will start to grow under the brash. Other methods for reintroducing sphagnum include pellets, beads and gels, and again these are all commercial products that you can buy from specialist suppliers. The gel is sphagnum fragments suspended in a gel, and you could either spread it onto bare peat by hand, or you could put it into a backpack sprayer similar to what you'd use for pesticides. And then the pellets are sphagnum spores which are coated in clay. We have used these methods, but because they are much slower, because you have to wait for the the carrier material to break down before the sphagnum can start to establish, we don't know how successful they've been yet, but they are another option. We've had mixed results with our sphagnum clumps so far. On some sites it's worked quite well, so you can see in this photo on the left this clump has tripled in size from its original handful sized when it was planted. And then in other areas that haven't worked so well, so particularly on our pilot sites that we've been doing sphagnum trials on as part of the Carbon Connect project, we've really struggled to get our clumps going, and we think a lot of that is down to the method that we use for planting them, because they are planted into a depression in the peat rather than into a hole. They aren't planted as deeply, and therefore they dry out much more easily in the summer when we have dry conditions, and they don't cope as well with being inundated in the winter. So we've had mixed results. We would like to continue to trial clumps until we can work out a way of using them that works really well and is really reliable, because obviously it is much cheaper for us to harvest clumps from donor sites than it is to buy them in. And at the moment what we're looking at trialling is splitting the clumps into smaller plug sizes so that they can be planted in the same way, and seeing if that works. So yeah, at the moment mixed results from the clumps. With the plug plants, we've found generally they're much more consistent and successful on a variety of sites. So you can see here it's a really wet site, and a lot of these have been inundated for most of the winter, and still within a year they've all managed to get established and double or triple in size. And then again in these photos you can see it's they've been planted onto heather cuts on the site where it's very heather dominated, and again they've worked really well and done very well in amongst the brash. And here's just a comparison showing how well the plugs have done within a year. So definitely in the North Pennines anyway, on our upland peatlands, plugs are definitely the most reliable way of reintroducing sphagnum. I suppose that is to be expected. They're a commercial product and they are designed to grow very quickly. They grow very vigorously. They recover well from the shock of being transplanted from one place to another, whereas the clumps seem to not really recover so well from that. And they can survive in all the conditions that we've trialled them in so far. As for the sphagnum fragments and the gel and the pellets, we're still, I think we haven't tried those for long enough yet to know how well they do in comparison to these other methods which we've used more consistently over the years. And as I said earlier, the pellets and the gel are a slower method, and we haven't had them in place long enough to know how well they work. The fragments, again, from what we've seen so far, it's been mixed results like the clumps, and we are about to trial using the fragments again, but this time on bare peat and then covering them with brash rather than on a cut heather site as we had done previously. So we'll see how that goes. I also wanted to include some before and afters of peatland restoration as a whole, so you can see where the sphagnum feeds into that and how the overall picture looks once we've completed all of the steps that I mentioned earlier. So this is an aerial photograph of a site 3 years apart, and in the second photo you can see we've put brash in, we've put coir rolls and stone dams in, and you can see some plug plants as well, and we'll have added sphagnum too. So you can see once we've completed all of those steps, it makes a massive difference to the amount of surface area that's vegetated and really reduces the amount of bare peat. And the same in these photos here, which are 2 years apart. In the photo on the left you can see we've just finished spreading brash, so you can see the brown brash sitting on top of the black bare peat, and then 2 years later it's all revegetated up really well. So as I said, the sphagnum is the final step in the process, and it's just the icing on the cake, just to make sure that we've got the vegetation community heading in the right direction, and we've got the foundations in place for the bog to recover really well. Peatland restoration is definitely a growing industry at the moment. We're seeing more funding than ever becoming available as governments and private financiers and other funders are all becoming aware of the potential of peatlands for fighting climate change. So because of that, we've got more peatland restoration projects than ever before in the UK. We're all doing more restoration than we've ever done before, and therefore the demand for sphagnum products is growing all the time. Unfortunately, in the UK, most of the peatland projects are dependent on one main supplier of sphagnum, so it would be really good to expand that supply chain and encourage other suppliers to get involved so that we can work with people more locally, and there's just more competition within the sector. There are other markets for sphagnum as well as in peatland restoration, and at the moment probably the main one is its use in peat-free compost. Again, public awareness of the importance of peatlands is growing over time, and therefore the demand for peat-free compost is increasing, and sphagnum has been found to be a really useful component in that. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. We have more information on our website if you'd like to find out more about the other 5 steps that I mentioned, and we're also on social media. Thank you.
And thank you very, very much to Kate. Now, we knew this was going to be a tight one. We knew we had long videos and lots of content, but stay with us. There is still 60 good people online. There are a few questions to answer, and I don't want these lovely speakers to have stayed awake this long only for them not to be grilled a little bit by you or me. So can I invite to join me? I think we have Kate, we should have Harry, we should have Martin, we should have Gert-Jan, and we should have Aldert. I believe we should have all of those good people with us. Thank you so much again. As you can see, I am literally a freaky fangirl, I think. Extremely interesting, extremely informative, and extremely inspiring. And I think it is absolutely clear so much useful work has gone on to raise visibility on the one hand for these really fascinating farming practices that help keep peatlands alive, but also such a lot of work in providing pathways for farmers and landowners to be part of the solution. And the toolbox obviously is very much geared towards helping them and many others to really understand what this issue is. So can we just deal first with the questions that came in, if I may? Now, Aldert and Martin, I believe you both wanted to provide an answer to one, but because Kate, we just heard from her, I don't know if that question was answered. I think it might have been in your presentation. I'm just having a look. Yes, there was a question on whether raising the pH as part of the restoration works is purely for revegetation purposes, as blanket bogs are normally nutrient poor, but as far as I understand, that question was answered in your presentation. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Kate, knowing that that was a question that came in?
No, just that we have issues with the pH being too high and, too low, too acidic for things to germinate, and sphagnum doesn't grow well below a certain pH. So yeah, we have the opposite issue. Obviously, blanket bogs are acidic and nutrient poor, but to get the revegetation to take place, we do have to raise it just slightly.
Okay, thank you so much. So without further ado, I think let me just read out that question. Is it right, Aldert and Martin, you both wanted to answer the question about compost as a soil conditioner and organic fertilizer? Can the product compete with artificial fertilizers and other organic fertilizers, for example, agriculture residues, both in price and fertilizing efficiency? In other words, have you made a cost-benefit analysis of the production schemes? What prices for the ton harvested biomass are possible to achieve? So, Aldert, did you want to start and respond there? Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, you can hear me?
I can.
Okay. I'm not in this kind of business, but I know Christina Lang from Luuk, which is a nature conservation part of the Ministry of Agriculture in Finland, where there is a lot of coastal reedlands. They work with composters together, and they can't get enough biomass harvested for compost, which is bought by people in Finland to use in their gardens. And it looks like you have a level playing field in this sin that you are allowed to use this extra fertilizer from outside, and it looks like it's better because it's putting humus also in the soil. So you are putting about 2.5 tons of carbon in the soil when you use the reed compost in your garden or also in your agricultural business. So this is also for bigger companies and for farmers.
Thank you. Martin, was that you wanted to also come in?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's true. Just to say, we didn't do a cost-benefit analysis, but we estimate around €15 per ton compost we make. So for applying like 15 10 to 15 ton to a hectare, we estimate like for everything 200 to 300 euros. So also the cost to spread it out. But just to put it a little bit in a context, indeed, like Aldert said, it's very interesting to use for carbon sequestration. That's the first thing. But then secondly, so it's a stable product that you put into your soil, which gives nitrogen in a slow way. Also to your crop, so that's interesting. Then secondly, you have also the potassium coming from it, which is interesting for your crop. And then also it's buffering the pH of your soil. So that are three other things, which you cannot obtain with just an inorganic fertilizer. So we have a lot of co-benefits coming then from putting the compost into the soil. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, go.
When I can put one thing on top of this, the prices of artificial fertilizer in the last months rocketed to sky high. So we are in a business which is very problematic. Farmers are already buying on time for contracts delivering fertilizer next year, April, for prices which are 3 times the price they paid last year in April. So using wetland compost is going to be very interesting and also very smart financially for farmers.
And I see that you are very good with this smart financially. I love that. I love your messages for Timmermans. Surely, have you met him? You must have met him, right? Did you meet him at COP26? Aldert, did you cross paths with Timmermans?
We asked, the University of Greifswald and the Suco Foundation asked for contacts with the Timmermans group, but they only give us their secondants, the second people, but they were always sitting on the front row. So we know a lot about how interesting the Timmermans is in carbon farming and in using these things. So it is on their point of view. But we need to press so the peatlands are coming out better as the humus and carbon farming in normal agricultural fields. But we are definitely on the radar of Director General Agriculture, Environment
and Climate. Yes, and that's absolutely critical, that kind of triple helix there of those, absolutely. Let me just there was a question, I think you've probably seen it, Martin, as a sort of a follow-up. So from Willy Verbeek, do you think about producing something else than compost?
No, we were only within our pilot site focusing on this farm composting, but of course, we have seen other examples here. But I think also the amounts we collect of biomass is rather limited. So to make really other products from it, it's maybe difficult. But for this farm composting collaboration between nature organizations and farmers who lack carbon-rich materials, and that's a good opportunity. And that's the way it goes now.
Can I just, while we have them, because I know that people are having to drop off because I know they're going to be tired, but I don't want to not hear from Gert-Jan and from Harry. So if I come to you, Gert-Jan, first, that again, I had just said, for me, when I come to this from the outside, there seems to be this perfect storm of circumstances, whether it's, these rising costs. We heard that from Aldert with the containers, with, the reeds and coming in from China and the problematic there, whether it's what Kate said, there is this growing public awareness, there's more funding than ever, you've got the private, you've got the government, investors because of this obvious awareness of climate change. Now, you said, Gert-Jan, many innovations are on the way. Yes, we need to sort subsidies and regulations. It's coming. Anything else you want to say about that? Because the purpose of these 2 webinars really is to get farmers out there engaged in understanding that there is a lot of support. It's not perfect yet, but there is a lot of the support, and it seems to be like the right moment. I mean, we even heard it from the Flemish farmer there, prepare for the future. Anything of that you can add for us, please?
Well, what we see is that an important thing is that farmers, when they want to switch to wet agriculture or to polyculture, that they are living in a drained landscape. So you really need, on a larger scale, rewetting to be well, to be effective. Mm-hmm. So when you want to transform to wet agriculture on maybe 10 hectares or so, it can be too expensive. But when you turn a whole polder into wet agriculture, you may earn a lot of money because you just stop the pumps and you get wet agriculture by itself. And nowadays, water authorities, they need a lot of money to keep water table low enough to grow potatoes and maize and so on, and to have cows there. So switching to a wet agriculture, it may be very a good advantage for many people and also for farmers. And so I think there are many changes that we have to make, but they are too difficult to do that in just 1 week. So yeah. We really have to switch quite a vast amount of hectares on peatlands to wet agriculture. We have to do that. We have to do it tomorrow or next week or next year, but we have to do it soon. And that will give a total new world, or at least part of our country, where wet farmers really can do a good job.
Thank you very much. And you are right in the middle of wet farming as far as the background goes. I love where you are. I've got this blank white wall here. I just look that typical sort of urban creature, and you've got that as your backdrop. I'm going to come to somebody else with a kind of a...
The cattail is harvested here.
Sorry?
The cattail is harvested here last month.
The cattail. Wait, I have to ask about the cattail. I promised Clara Diebolt from Carbon Connects that I would ask either you or Aldert. Cattail, right? So that's edible too. Yes, except it shouldn't be confused with some poisonous cousin that looks like it. Is that correct or not? You can go wrong with cattail. You can think it's cattail and it's actually iris something. No, is that right, Aldert? Or have I got that wrong?
I take over.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. No, it's not. You can eat cattail. There's above ground biomass and underground biomass. The problem when we start rewetting, we don't want this carbon dioxide emitting from the formerly drained agriculture use peatlands to come in the air. So when you want something from under the earth, you need to extract it when the water is on top. So the soil there's no oxygen coming in and there's no extra carbon dioxide coming out. But we know there's some very, very expensive restaurants. We Noma in Copenhagen, you pay €600 for one meal, where you have 22 parts, and one of them is raw cattail. And the raw cattail can be from the above ground, lower area of the plant, and from the rhizomes. And the rhizomes, it's a sweet grass. Cattail is sweet grass, and the lower part is it tastes like a very good asparagus.
It's very good. Yes, I personally think that when we're talking about business models, that should have come out first. You know, the restaurant with the price of that and the cattail. I don't know why you didn't, but you told us about the geese flying over your property. You said nothing about that. But hang on, I'm just going to come to Harry, because you've been beautifully sphinx-like and silent. What really struck me, and I'm going back right to the beginning, and yes, to the lovely ladies, I'm aware that people are needing to go. We've still got 47 people. I am going to round off soon, but I just want to give a chance for Harry and Kate to say something. Harry, at the beginning, I think you talked, when you were talking about the pilot sites, about 1,000 tons of CO2 savings. It was a really impressive number of savings, and then all the different ways in which sphagnum could be used. And then we talked about the charcoal burner, and then we talked about the testing for protein extraction. Again, in the context of this particular topic, raising awareness, letting farmers understand the opportunities, what is your experience around farmers? Do you feel that there is that interest? Do you feel that there is enough knowledge of the carbon savings? What's your experience?
I think our experience with farmers is there's definitely interest, and I think knowledge is, where there hasn't been knowledge, farmers have very quickly understood what's happening, because they know their land sinks underneath them. That's not complicated to then say, well, something is going off your land, that something is carbon dioxide. That's a fairly straightforward message. The main thing that always comes back with farmers is money. I'd say they are interested. So one of the sites I put in the Broads National Park, I think it was the second site I showed, is actually on a private farm. So it's not land we own, it's land we came to an agreement with a private farm owner. Yes, he's received some compensation money from us to take part in that, but also he is personally very interested and invested in the initiative himself and kind of looking to the future. And I think that is going to be sort of the big question is, can you settle the money? And I think that's where layering up all these benefits, possibly your carbon credits, your water credits, your biodiversity credits on top of what may turn out actually to be quite a profitable crop, because as Aldert says, the prices are changing all the time. There's definitely, we know, for example, with some crops, like if you can grow a commercial reed in the UK, you can sell it because there just isn't enough demand at the moment. Some of these where the supply chain isn't quite as established, like typha, might be a little bit behind, but it'll catch up. We know from establishing our own sites just how much the sphagnum costs to buy. So if you can start selling that on a large scale, you can potentially get a reasonable amount of money off it. And also the prices are going to fall for doing this. The capital costs will fall as more equipment becomes more available and you can mechanize. We've tried out some new technologies with our pilot sites as well, which as they spread wider at the moment, we've had sites which have had to be planted entirely by hand, which will switch to being, I think, some of the things Kate presented with the sphagnum, that's also coming along for sort of Phragmites, so the reed crops. But it's also worth bearing in mind cattle farming in the EU loses money. It's not a profitable enterprise. No one makes money farming cattle, yet it happens because there's subsidy. So it's not impossible to imagine that this will happen and go ahead.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to Kate, and then I'm going to slowly round off unless there is like 2 sentences of stuff that you say, Kat, I've got to get this across before we close. But Kate, there indeed, you said also, apart from, I quoted about public awareness is growing, there is more funding. You also talked about there being only one supplier of sphagnum, did you say? So there's even opportunities there, are there not? I mean, anything, I suppose I'm saying to you in a very clunky way, anything that you've heard or you wanted to add to from your fellow speakers, or anything you wanted to add from your presentation that you think needs to go out there as a message before I close?
Yeah, so we have, well, as I said, as far as I know, there's only one supplier. I could be wrong about that. There could be other small scale suppliers and we're just not aware of them. But we have trialed growing sphagnum on a fairly larger scale ourselves, sort of in partnership with the Rivers Trust and also with a local college. And it proved harder than we thought. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily a straightforward thing, but it would certainly be very lucrative if you could get it right.
Okay, and again, a message to, before we're our audience, we still got 41, so there was still, what would be your message to move forward? You know, we still need to get some stuff right. There's legislation that still needs, you know, the subsidies still need to be right. Again, the equipment, as we heard from Aldert, is expensive, so there's technology which needs to keep pace. What would you say to those who are not sure or kind of quite gung-ho but need a bit of a push? What would you say?
Well, for us, our main limiting factor is contractor capacity at the moment. So we've got, you know, loads of people are giving us funding to the restoration, but we just don't have enough contractors or in particular helicopters to deliver the restoration. So anybody that's interested in getting involved or getting, you know, trialing some of the machinery that we need for this kind of work, it's, yeah, we've got the work for people. We just need more contractors.
Okay, thank you. Gert-Jan, anything, last word, just a few sentences from you for our lovely audience before they release themselves for even more alcohol and sleep, or maybe neither, who knows? To you.
I would repeat my last words, so let's do it. So I think it's important that we go on. So there may be some problems, there may be some trouble, something that has to be solved, but well, that will be solved by doing it. So getting more experience and solving things, that will help a lot. And well, I think as government and as authorities, we have to support farmers in their first steps to switch. So that will take some years, but I think we have to go on.
Absolutely. And also, as we heard from our Flemish farmer, you need to get ahead of the curve and prepare for the future. I've seen your hand raised, Aldert. Yes, I'll come to you and then I'll come to Martin. Yes, Aldert, please.
Yes, I'd like to put my screen on.
Okay, I've got to say one word, Aldert, because the interpreters have to go at a certain time and I don't want people, so keep it short. If we lose them, I'm going to just say thank you to them now. Go on.
Yeah. A way of harvesting sphagnum.
Okay. But I'm not, okay.
Do you see this?
Yep, we do, yes.
Okay,
yes.
This is Hankhausen, which is between Bremen and Hamburg in the north of Germany. This is a 15-year-old pilot site where the business Mokura, which produce growing medium, tries to use fresh sphagnum as growing medium. So not use peat, which is a fossil fuel, when you like to use to explain it. And we tried to harvest this. So I have to go back. I have to close this one.
Okay, I'm going to say again, if the interpreters need to go, we will finish in English the last couple of minutes because I don't want to keep you. But if I can ask Aldert to, yes. Very. Okay.
It should start. I don't think. What you see here is a log logic machine, which is it's interesting because Harry Mach, who works for the Bros National Park, and this machine, the first one, is designed 20 years ago to use it for harvesting reed. But in what you see here is we try to harvest sphagnum, which is grown unnaturally in a constructed wetlands, which we made. This is the first time in 5 years somebody drives over this sphagnum, and we found out that this machine with this constellation will harvest 6 centimeters of sphagnum, which is then perfectly as a material which can be strewn out on new nature areas where constructing of new peatlands is possible. And the price of a cubic meter of this material, which is germinating material for new peatlands, is about 675 euros a cubic meter. So it's very interesting, but it also points out that we know it works. So we can grow sphagnum on flat pieces of box, leftover box, which where the peatland is used for extraction, and then last part of the peat we start growing sphagnum, and we use the sphagnum also for starting other projects in other places. So this is something nice Kate can use for her business.
Okay, thank you so very much. I'm not going to prevail upon any of you anymore because I do need to release people, but let me say that if anybody, listen, I mean, we've said it enough. We've got the link to the Carbon Toolbox came into the Q&A. So all the good people, the 37 of you who's still with us, I'm sure, I mean, you can get in touch with any of these speakers. Would you agree through the Carbon Connects project? So for those who have direct questions and want to know more, you can see that everybody is keen and super passionate about their subject. We've got lots of lovely thank yous in the chat that you may have seen to our lovely speakers. So I want to thank you, don't go away, two thank yous for taking the trouble to record the videos and for your sterling work, and thanks to the interpreters, if they are still there, for they're brilliant in helping bring this event to life. And big thanks to the fabulous, highly committed team, the Carbon Connects team behind this event, led by the delightful Clara Diebold. You're absolutely fabulous, all of you ladies. Now, if you got something good out of this sparkling 90 minutes, I must say to you all who are watching, please do check out part 1. Don't forget Carbon Connects YouTube channel, there it is. And what else is there? All sorts of videos, farmer to farmer, all sorts of other stuff that can help you on your journey. And that C toolbox is absolutely critical. And Harry, you said your booklet is coming out second half of next year. It's already been tested in 3 countries with various farmers. So that's also coming, a handy booklet. And don't forget, if you're really happy and want to spread the word, hashtag Peatlands Matter and hashtag Sustainable Peatlands. This is my last event of 2021. I'm so pleased this was the subject. I was absolutely literally gripped and fascinated. Anybody need anybody to do any of this? Seriously, Kate, I want to be doing the digging thing. I really, truly do. Please call me and ask. I am a bit of a freaky fangirl. So get online, everybody. Please do sign up to be part of that European Peatlands network. That's absolutely critical. Do it before midnight strikes on the 31st. I wish you all so much luck in your ongoing endeavours. I, of course, wish you the nicest of holiday seasons. We've got some thanks coming into the chat now. Very interesting, very innovative, says our audience. So I think on that note, we can wish you all goodbye. So lovely speakers, thank you very much. And that's it from me. Good night.